Hi, I'm August Keller, and this is my review of Joker, Folie, Deux. So, this movie is surprisingly meta. It deals with themes of public perception, which, is very much about the first film, Joker. What happens when the idea of you, is taken by the public and turned into something else? That's very much what this movie is about. That seems to be speaking to the previous film. There's a lot of discussion about that previous film, a lot of controversy around it. And this theme and the themes here kind of touch more specifically on the things that came up about that movie as well, such as identity. Well, identity is more of like a jumping off point. Like Arthur Fleck is dealing with his own identity, and how the public views him versus who he really is. Um, but that's very much about the first film in a meta way, and it definitely addresses the idea of violence too, the way the glorification of violence and the ramifications of that. So to be honest, from that standpoint, I'm impressed. I liked the first film. Um, I praised it highly, but I was a little uncomfortable with that because I do hear the criticisms of it, and this movie makes me feel more comfortable about liking the first film because of these things that I was just all these themes. And it's not just like bringing up these thoughts in an abstract way, it really solidifies them in Arthur's arc, which is very motivated. He wants to belong, so he has this internal struggle where he's trying to be what people want him to be, what the public sees him as, but also there's like this an internal conflict because that isn't exactly who he is, really. So that's really the internal conflict of the film and what his arc is built around. So that's all really good. The problem is that the plot is very dry. It's all about the trial, his trial. And I find him to be questionably sympathetic as an anti-hero. He's very much an anti-hero, and I think the movie definitely very feels for him. And I get that. He needs help, not punishment so much. He needs help. He has illnesses that need to be addressed. And again, this makes the first movie seem better because it seems like this movie makes it seem like that movie like that's what that movie was talking about. Those messages were muddled, but this movie makes them a little clearer. And so yeah, he needs help, and I sympathize with that. Most people, I think, would. But the issue is that he really kind of shuns responsibility for a lot of the movie. That's a big part of his internal conflict. A big part of that public perception versus who he really is. He is responsible to a certain extent for his actions, no matter how ill he is, no matter how much society fails him. He still has agency, but he seems to really try to shun all that and not really take responsibility, not really, harness his autonomy. And he also, in this movie, I feel like he is a bit of a blank slate. He doesn't have a lot of charisma to him. His personality is, his dysfunction, but he is very meek and timid a lot of the time, and really kind of just so driven by wanting to fit in and be accepted and be loved that he really is just so eager to be what others want him to be. So a lot of the movie, it's kind of hard to see his personality. So all that is to say is that it's hard to relate necessarily. As much as I want to sympathize with, you know, people like him, this specific character, um, it's hard to sit down for a movie for 2 hours plus and really feel actively engaged, frankly, as much as I care about all these messages and agree with what the movie's trying to say, it isn't exactly fun. It isn't exactly enjoyable or even necessarily engaging. And the side characters, they all are constantly dehumanizing Arthur. They're all kind of projecting their own desires onto him. They want him to be something, and they're kind of and when he isn't that something, they they don't treat him right. And so again, there's just all these characters in this movie that it's like hard. Who do I like? It's a movie full of jerks. And I was thinking of a movie like The Wolf of Wall Street, where Leonardo DiCaprio's character is a very unlikable protagonist, but he's also very charismatic. And this movie just kind of is missing that energy and that charisma. Everyone's just kind of a bummer, as well as being unlikable. So it's just kind of alienating. Is as thematically relevant as this movie is, the plot really, it's funny because the plot was kind of a weaker point of the first movie too, the first Joker. But I feel like the drama was so visceral that that kind of shown that really took the center stage, even though the plot just kind of oddly was kind of there to help it. And this time around, the plot is just so there, so dense and exposition heavy, and there's some contrivances in the plot too with the courtroom drama stuff. It's just kind of like, would a judge really tolerate this? It really starts to hurt my suspension of disbelief. And I don't know, it just really takes more of a center stage. And while the drama is still interesting and I think more thematically rich, the plot is just so much more in the front and bogging it down. So still, I think the writing is more good than bad, because it really ends with a lot of these like tragic subversions that might linger with a lot of viewers. It's lingering with me. I left the theater feeling a certain way, but the more I thought about it, the more it kind of stuck with me. And the acting is a lot more internal. I mean, there's singing and dancing, which is external, but other than that, the movie he's very, it's very, very internalized, and it's very complex. He's a lot of like body language, a lot of facial expressions that depict a lot of subtle shifts and internal conflicts. So even though it's not as like showy as the previous film, I think there's still a lot of skill in the acting here. So all that is to say that Joker 2, I think, deserves credit for being this self-aware deconstruction, even if it's kind of hard to relate to. It's weird. It's a movie that I respect more than I enjoyed. A lot like Megalopolis in some ways. It's not as messy as that. The plot is much more clear. But it's along those lines, frankly. Technically, uh, Joker 2 is oddly surreal and monotonous at the same time. It's kind of weird how it's like too much, but also too much of one thing at the same time. It really hits this really strong tone and just kind of never wavers from it, despite going into these surreal flights of fancy and musical numbers. It just always maintains this somber tone. So it's like being a lot of genres, but being one tone, like one strong tone. So it's this weird dynamic where it's too much and too little at the same time, if that makes sense. The imagery, the cinematography uses a lot of lighting. I think that's its strongest suit, and it uses these oneers, like these long extended takes that go through like a few different shots but don't cut. And it creates this feeling of immersion, and it's also very sickly but also very cinematic at the same time. It's very very cool. The lighting is like kind of gross colors, but also very stark. So it's pretty cool. The editing really struggles to mount much momentum. It's very committed to like this introspective pacing where it's very slow and emotional and thoughtful, but I think it just kind of does it too much or it just kind of struggles. I think this might be because of the writing as well, but it struggles to really find energy. I think slow movies can still have like this emotional energy to them, and this one really kind of it's just because it's just so I don't know if muddled's the right word, but kind of muddled in its craft and its direction, I guess. The momentum just isn't there, and it feels kind of like a drag. The sound uses a lot of distortions and emphasis. It's really like subjective. Not too much. It's not the most subjective sound design I've ever heard, but it has these pops of subjectivity that really elevate it and really are like the best parts of the sound design. The music is like intentionally rough, like where the singing is. It's not beautiful. The musical numbers are very kind of sour, like intentionally so, and I think that's supposed to like fit with the themes and fit with the whole like kind of aesthetic of the movie. So I'm not mad at that part of it. I mean, I know some people are not going to like it, but the music plays such a central role and is also abstract at the same time. Like, is it all in his head? Is it actually happening in the reality of the movie? And it also the song choices are frequently like juxtaposition, where it's like it would be a happy song, but it's sang in this sad way in this sad movie. So it really kind of recontextualizes the song. The production design is very like grimy and confining, which again makes sense. It fits the plot, it fits the themes, but it's also kind of excessive. I felt it's unpleasant to sit through. So even though it all makes sense, I don't know. It doesn't translate into an enjoyable movie to watch. The cast, has Gaga and Gleeson as the notable additions, who are both good. They do what they're there to do, and I'm happy to see them. But the movie still very much is about Joaquin Phoenix. This is Joaquin Phoenix's movie, and everyone else besides those three are highly replaceable. So I don't know. I think it's kind of a is much even though Gaga is this big selling point in the marketing. I feel like the casting in the last movie and this movie are about the same. I mean, the last movie had De Niro. The effects that there's some convincing stunts. Not too many, but there are a few. And the CGI, I found there's more of it than the last movie, but I found it to be pretty average. So I think there being more of it isn't necessarily better. So yeah, overall, I think Joker 2 is admirably unwieldy. It bites off more than it can chew, but I appreciate that it went for it. It kind of reminds me of The Last Jedi in a way where it takes this franchise and goes in this new, refreshing direction, or like this. It kind of like tries to push the boundaries of it, and it's going to piss a lot of people off. The people that care about the franchise, a lot of them are probably not going to like it, and the people who don't care about the franchise might not even notice it. But there might be a few people like me who appreciate it, and yeah, I do appreciate it. Like I said, it wasn't enjoyable to sit through, so maybe I would enjoy it more on the second viewing. Now I had to like think about it a lot and really kind of piece together what it meant and what it was going for. As a literal piece of entertainment, it's it's kind of challenging, but as a thoughtful piece of art that's actually deconstructing its predecessor and the genre as a whole, it's interesting, and I admire it, and I respect all that. So, yeah, I hope that's reflected in my words and in my score here. I think I'm torn on whether or not I'd recommend it. I hope, if you're like me, I don't know. I don't really know who this is for. I think there are people out there that would respect it, and I respect those who respect it. I think a lot of people aren't. It's clear from the online response that most people don't like it, which I think is unfortunate. But you know, I honestly kind of get it. So yeah, I guess that's all I have to say about that. Um, if you like what I'm doing here, please feel free to like and subscribe. I also have an Instagram linked in the description. I'd love support there as well. But at the very least, I appreciate you watching, and I'll see you next time. Okay, thanks. Bye.